The Grand Wheel. Shane Scarn was a gambler, and he took the big plunge when he bet his life to get to the inner circle of the Grand Wheel, because the wheel was the ultimate syndicate, the final mafia that controlled all that was illegal in all the planets under human control. But Shane was not to know whether he had won or lost when he gained his point, because the wheel had plans for him, and they made him the historic offer he could not refuse. There was, it seemed, a similar gambling combine in the rest of the galaxy, bigger by far than the little group of stars held by Earthlings. And the wheel wanted a cut in this. So Shane Scarn found himself selected to be humanity's own player in a game in which nobody knew the value of the cards, and the rules of the game were infinitely variable. Science fiction with a difference, by the author of Collision Course and The Fall of Chronopolis. So, there's a man in town by the name of Reynolds, Max Reynolds, and he is despicable. No one is very sure of where he came from, or even when. He is not from Stone's Way. Upon that we all agree, but some have long ago memories of him. He bears an uncanny resemblance to Poe, that is, Edgar Allan Poe. So much so that it's been claimed, entirely without evidence, that he must be descended from that author. Now, this is where the story starts. I was walking up the hill to Greenwood College on Old Forest Road when I saw Reynolds. Old Forest Road is hardly ever used by cars because it's narrow and at this time of year always slick with fallen leaves. It's preferred by pedestrians because it's scenic and overhung by trees. Reynolds was riding his bicycle, a black 3-speed, and he was coming down the hill. He was up ahead of me as I was walking up the hill, and he was being very cautious because he was on the steepest part of the hill. His brakes were creaking loudly when suddenly something gave out. He let out a shrill noise, very high-pitched, and his bike sped up. He tried to put his feet down to slow himself, but they just slid along the leaves. His steering wobbled, and then he turned suddenly. The bike toppled end over end, sending Reynolds face first onto the street. I ran to help him, but as I neared, I saw something strange. It wasn't Reynolds on the ground, but something else. I don't know what it was. It was moaning, raspy sounding, but conscious. When it saw me pause, its eyes widened. It realized that I could see it as it really was. "Found out, am I?" It did not seem too bothered. "Oh well, it's been a good run." And so it told me its tale, which would have been too marvelous to credit if not for the fact that the teller was some kind of, well, it wasn't human. It had been running, it said, from time to time and place to place when it chanced upon a particularly benighted city called Baltimore in the year of that land, 1849. It was being hunted by the Caneer. It said this as if I should know what the Caneer are, although I don't. It could feel them coming, it said, but it could not yet jump again. There was something to do here about a device which required charging. The Reynolds thing stayed in the shadows. It knew it would be seen as a monster if it was witnessed by the people of this place, but it also had an idea. You see, it could change its shape or take the shape of most humanoids of comparable size, but it couldn't do this without the permission of the Taken. This was an old law, the it said, and it added, it's not as if it would actually take the body, just the visage or the eidolon of the Taken, but it was bound by its law nonetheless for ancient reasons, originally to avoid blood disputes in its own homeland. So the Reynolds thing concocted a plan. It stole human clothes from a clothesline as well as a cloak and hood to hide inside. It carefully watched a den of iniquity, a place that was dark inside where men went to forget themselves. The timing of its next moves was desperately important. It waited and watched, carefully choosing from amongst the shambles who frequented the place. It felt at the edges of their minds, feeling for a kind of perspective, for one who would be willing to make a deal with something like itself. Finally, it could feel the Caneer closing in. They had also felt him, and they were near. They were observing him. He entered the place. It was surprisingly easy to mingle with the people in the darkened room. Their minds were smeared with distortions and lewd confabulations. He found the one he wanted at the back of the room. It was easy to start a conversation. The Reynolds thing introduced itself as Maximilian Reynolds. It had selected this human name because it sounded similar to its own real name if one were to speak this human name underwater in a high-pitched voice. It offered money, although of course it had none, as a wager. If it won a game of cards, it would take the shape of the man and his clothes. If it lost, it would hand the money over. The man wanted money very badly. The game was played. Reynolds cheated. The exchange was made. Of course, Reynolds did not leave the man naked. They traded clothing. And so Reynolds left, hidden in the shape of another man, right under the noses of the Kinnear, and by the law of because he had been observed and had been deemed innocent, he would be untouchable for as long as he retained that shape. Reynolds said he did not know what became of the other man, because Reynolds left the city that night at that moment. He knew the Kinnear would quickly realize that something was amiss. They would follow his trail inside. They would see the man in the clothing Reynolds had been wearing. They would probe his mind, and this would not be pleasant or particularly healthy for the man, but he should survive it if he was strong. Then the Kinnear would learn of their mistake, and they would howl. So it was that Reynolds moved on, and he kept moving on, never at home in this world, but at least safe. He had stayed in Stone's Way longer than any other place he had been. Now, though, after its fall from the bike, because he had lost his shape, he must run, or the Kinnear would get him. And so Reynolds twisted a device on his wrist and disappeared, laughing. I think he was actually delighted to leave this earth, to travel again to other places and other times. Now here's the funny part. No, I've gone on for too long already, but I suggest you read the Wikipedia page on Edgar Allan Poe. I think I know who Reynolds tricked at the back of that tavern.